Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, July 5th, 2024. Time for another show. Time for the end of the week. A Friday that feels like a Monday because we were off yesterday. And I don't know. Yeah, like as time was running out on yesterday, the fireworks were over. And I started to have that sort of Sunday night feeling like, oh no, back to work in just a couple of hours. And I don't know what makes me nervous about it. This is a great thing to do in the morning. But I knew it would be Friday. I knew we would be without Greg Dworkin's support. And yet, an election having just happened in, as he says, merry old England, all over the UK, the elections, and something that he's been following relatively closely. And yet now we have results and he's not here. Gotta wait until Monday to hear from him. But I can tell you what happened. I don't know. All right. So that's the end of that. Labour wins. And that's about the most basic thing you can say about it. It's apparently a very complex outcome. But from what I understand, and those of you who understand better can feel free to feed me a couple of good articles that will explain this. But what I understand is a big landslide in terms of the numbers. Like if you look at the results, there's some 400 and something, if I saw the number correctly, Labour members will be sitting in Parliament. Whereas the Tory party, the Conservatives, who previously held the prime ministership, i.e. had put together a majority coalition, at least I don't remember how things stood prior to this, just that Rishi Sunak was the PM there, prime minister, by virtue of having put that majority together, and his party, the Conservatives, end up with just 100 and something, 21 seats in Parliament to the 400 and something from Labour. There's a mixed bag of other smaller parties that hold significant, some hold significant number of seats, some less so, but a huge romp for Labour. Now, what that means, well, you'll have to ask someone who lives there better than I do. They'll know better than I do. I can read you the newspaper accounts of it. But what I found interesting was that there was also some sharing of, I should try and find this one. I wonder if I can dig up the chart I saw via Blue Sky earlier today. I knew I should have put this thing aside. Just showing essentially what had happened here and a slightly different view of things if you look at percentage of the vote cast for the various parties. It doesn't look like as big of a romp as it did before. So it looks like something 30 or so percent, 38. I'm going to see if I can find this thing too. It was like 38 or so percent of the votes had been cast for Labour candidates, but they won an overwhelming huge majority of the seats. So it was, I guess, like super efficient vote or seat flipping and seat holding and very strategic vote. I don't know whether that was a plan or anything, but it looks like they won a tremendous number of seats with like the minimum possible number of votes spread out around the country. So it's really kind of interesting to see those results. The immediate impact, as the front pages of the Washington Post, and I opened up the Post because it's hometown sort of paper here, and the Guardian because they're, from the UK. And the results are what I guess we're expecting. Keir Starmer will be the prime minister from Labour. Rishi Sunak will resign, both as prime minister, he has to, and as the leader of the Conservative Party as well, having seen his party clobbered this way. The other thing I did see and did put aside was the note that the Conservative Party leadership question is going to be very interesting and awkward, and might give them fits for a long time to come. This Blue Sky account, working under the screen name of John Bull, which will make sense to British watchers, Garius, Garius at Blue Sky, says, in reflecting on his own post of some 8 hours previous, where he had said, worth remembering for the next 5 years that the Tory party rules assume that they'll have a large number of sitting members of parliament. That is, to automatically start a leadership contest. Now, only 15% of Tory MPs have to, as they say, put in their letters. 15% of 130-ish seats is not a lot, but now it turns out that the rules are even more awkward than he thought. He updates and says, to confirm, we have now near final numbers. I'll put it this way. Every time 19 Tory MPs get a bit grumpy, this parliament and stick their letters into the 1922 committee. Remember when Greg told us about this, about how you force these leadership changes? It'll automatically trigger a leadership contest. This will be doubly awkward, he goes on, as the number of nominations required for a candidate to make the Tory leadership ballot isn't a percentage. It's an absolute hard fixed number. So this is really interesting. So 15% of the party is what is required, I guess, to trigger if 15% of the party defects, essentially, not from the party, but desires a change in leadership, they can trigger an election. But 15% of 120 or so seats is not a lot of people. So what they say, the final number was 19 members of the party can trigger a leadership election. That's pretty scary. And you've seen what has happened with that here in the U.S. when a rump section of the Freedom Caucus was able to oust Kevin McCarthy. Not as well, it was also his party leader, but it wasn't a party election. They had the weird dynamic of his having occupied the speakership, and you could, if you're a big enough jerk and the other party hates you entirely, you're going to have almost 200. You'll have 200 and something votes in the bag there, and you only needed to get a handful of votes. But they may have a similar situation forcing people out of party positions in the Conservative Party. So then, the additional note here, this will be doubly awkward as the number of nominations required for a candidate to make the Tory leadership ballot isn't a percentage. So you oust your leader and you say, who will stand for election in that leader's place? And you nominate various people, and then you have a contest of some kind, as they had before, which was what landed us with Rishi Sunak not that long ago. It turns out 100, a fixed number of 100 members of parliament, i.e. members of the Tory party, are necessary to put up a nomination. And as he says, it sounded reasonable at the time when you had, 200, 300, 400. I don't know how many seats historically they've had in the past, but now they're down to 120 here. Sure sounded reasonable at the time. Good luck getting 100 Tory MPs to agree on something just to nominate a member for leadership. 100 of them must agree when there are only 121 of them in total. So that will be really something, I think. He goes on for a while. I haven't read the rest of this thread. Let's take a look. He continues and says, so frankly, this is actually the first barrier that will need addressing before they can even think of having a leadership contest. Because right now it would be literally impossible for more than one candidate to be nominated. So that's a problem, right? Unless you can, I don't know what the rules are. Can you say, well, I would nominate either of these people? Or are you stuck with one vote for nomination? Well, anyway, I suspect, he goes on to say, no one's explained that to cleverly, Badenoch and Suella yet. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing any of their names correctly, but clearly people who would be in the running if they can get their nomination letters behind them. They're going to need someone to wake up the 1922 committee and get them to change all the rules first. And this, kids, is why you ask experienced, I don't even know what this means, TTRPG. Oh, okay. Tabletop role-playing games, I think, right? TTRPG system designers like me, not me, but Garius, to draw up your political game system rules. Oh, that's an interesting idea. Game economists are necessary here. I think I got one in the house. I'll lend them to you. Well, this is where it will probably also get fun, he says, but we don't really know the rules of the 1922 committee, so God knows that their rules are, what their rules are on being quorate, etc., having a quorum, I guess. And yes, they may well need to run a 1922 election before they can even change any other rules. I don't even know what that means. Okay, so it's getting a little crazy out there, and we'll have to catch up on our terminology and what exactly is happening, but it certainly looks for all the world like it will be Keir Starmer as PM from the Labour Party. And let's see, we've got the Washington Post is doing sort of a live coverage streaming as they learn things and figure out what's going on. They let everyone know here. And since I don't know, at this point it's probably best to wait and see what the hell is going on here and what it will mean. I did pick up on a couple of other things, though, that people were chatting about that I thought were of interest in social media. So let's see if I can find all the things I did put aside. Yeah, here we go. This was another interesting take on things from one Judah Grunstein, Grunstein, Grunstein. Tell me a little bit about yourself here, Judah. Editor-in-chief of World Politics Review. Spent more than a year in Provence. How do you like that? Used to be an American in Paris, currently bringing coal to Newcastle. You tell me what that means. But all right, World Politics Review. That sounds serious enough. I don't know. But initial thoughts on the UK elections, it confirms once again that when a center-right party veers to the hard right in order to weaken the far right, I guess here talking about Conservative Party, veering further right in order to head off the Brexiteers and reform weirdos, and do I have that right? Is it the right party that I'm thinking of? And their own hard right. Well, what happens? It ends up doing the opposite. Oh no. After purging moderates and going full-on wingnuts and fever swamp, the Tories got decimated by reform, not Labour. I mean, Labour got all the seats, but it turns out that I guess the analysis of a large number of seats going to Labour, but without an overwhelming vote total for Labour. That is, like we were saying before, 30-something% of the vote for Labour, 20-something% of the vote for the Tories, and yet the results in terms of number of seats so large for Labour. I guess that is meant to illustrate there that it was less about gigantic swaths of the country saying, to hell with it, I'm switching, or I'm going to be a Labour voter, and more about conservative Tory voters saying, I'm going to either stay home or cast my ballot elsewhere or spend it on a third, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth party. And that's what appears to have happened. And so this analysis puts it that way. It's what ends up happening is when the Conservatives veer further right to try to capture the votes that they think might be leaking to far-right parties, it ends up backfiring on them. They purge their ranks of centrist, center-right folks and put wingnuts up to say, no, we're the true lunatic party. Vote for us. And people recognize the real brand and go to the original, and that leaves them without their electoral support across the board, and you end up with 400 and something seats landing in the hands of Labor, 100 seats in your hands, and just a smattering of seats in the hands of the far-right party. All your votes disappeared. Before I go on with this thing, I now see the chart I was looking at here. 3 charts this person sends around, George Perks, perhaps, Pearkes. I better open this up separately so I have it elsewhere. And he says 3 charts to help understand the UK election results. There's vote share by party over the last 4 UK general elections. So this time around, 2004, 33.5% of the vote for Labour, 23.6% for the Conservatives. So 33 to 23, and then a smattering of votes elsewhere. It was 12% for the Lib Dems, 2.5% for SNP, 14.1% for Reform/Brexit/UKIP, and 11, I gotta read closely, 14.3%, okay, for all other parties combined. So, it's not as big of a walloping by vote share, 33 to 23, for 400 plus seats for Labor and 100 seats, in the neighborhood of 100 seats for the Conservatives. But votes cast by party, and I'm not even certain I understand what this is measuring. Votes cast by party. Okay, so I guess basically a measure of how many party identified voters came out for each of the various parties. And I'm not certain of the scale here, but they have a 9.7 here for Labor and a 6.8 for the Conservatives, 3.5 for the Lib Dems, 0.7 for SNP, 4.1 for Reform, and 4.1 for all others as well. So, okay, again, here we see 9.7 to 6.8. It's not that big of a split. And yet, seats won per, what are we saying here? Million votes? 1,000 votes? What, MM? What's MM? That looks like million, maybe. Oh boy. I'm not certain about that. Let's see. Well, okay, it wants to think of it as millimeters, which it isn't, but per mm is, I don't know. But I'm going to guess per million votes. Is that possible? How many people they got over there? I guess it could be 1,000 now that I'm thinking about it. But okay. But I don't know that matters quite as much as the relative outcomes, which is to say the seats won per X number of votes. 42.5 seats won per, well, let's see, how many people are even in? I don't know the population offhand, so I can't do the math in my head. 42.5 seats won per X number of votes for Labor, whereas just 17.8 seats won for the same number of votes in total for the Conservatives. And in fact, the Lib Dems best them on that one, 20.3%, or 20.3 seats per X number of votes. Okay, well, all right. It would make a lot more sense if I knew what the abbreviation they were using actually meant. Okay, well, let's see. I wonder if I can figure it out this way by, like I can look at the parts per notation, right? All right, well, too bad. The point is that this guy was pointing out, or all the analysts pointing out that it really was like something, I guess, of a perfect storm there for Labor. They certainly got more votes and they got a larger share of the vote nationally, but they got them everywhere that they needed them, and maybe more to the point that the conservatives lost them either to other parties or to just plain apathy, and people stayed home, and they didn't. They lost, not I guess by a lot, but lost in a lot of seats. A lot of seats where they were defeated by not very much, I guess, is what the outcome of the analysis looks to be. So again, back to Judah Grunstein, who says, some initial thoughts on UK elections. One, it confirms again what happens when a center-right party veers to the hard right to weaken the far right. They thought they were going to, but it ends up doing the opposite. After purging your moderates and going full-on wingnuts and fever swamp, the Tories got decimated by Reform, not Labour. Reform voters showed up. They weren't able to turn those into a whole lot of victories where their party won seats, but they were able to deny a lot of votes to the Conservatives, who, as against Labour, ended up losing the seats. So secondly, Labour held steady in total votes, but combined with a fractured vote on the right, they won a historic parliamentary majority. This is in line with trends elsewhere in Europe. The far right rises and wins when the center left atomizes, as was the case, this person says, in Italy and France, and falls short when the center left holds, as in Spain and Portugal. I'd been thinking with relief that the UK was bucking the trend of a rising radicalized far right, but I think that was premature, or as he may say, premature, although he's not English. But anyway, and Labour inherits a catastrophic landscape for governance. That's a good point. It will take near perfect leadership and a lot of luck to get this right. Otherwise, 2029 could be scary. And he's got a couple of recommendations of people to follow in case we want to follow along. I don't know who is. Sam Friedman is one. I guess not the not the crypto guy. And then Alexander Clarkson are recommended here. And let's see, to tie these two thoughts together, though, Labour won after shifting to the center. So it may have got the same number of votes as in 2019, but not necessarily from the same voters. Starmer would do well to learn from Macron's mistakes, he says. Otherwise, radicalizing extremes could render the center irrelevant. So, well, very interesting. It's going to be complicated, and we're going to have to watch closely. But yeah, what would otherwise make huge headlines as, gigantic leftist victory in the UK doesn't really read that way to people who are watching more closely. 400 and something seats for Labour to 100 seats for the Conservatives. Huge leftward swing, but is it? And the answer is probably not. Not a huge swing towards Labour in terms of the number of votes cast for them, but circumstances being what they were, it results in a huge number of seats, but still a relatively, much closer divide between the Tories and Labour in terms of the number of votes cast for them than you would think from the number of seats they will be awarded. And then what will they be able to do with it? And should they be concerned about, while they may be able to do pretty much what they want legislatively, you're in a pretty dangerous atmosphere. And as this guy says here, they inherit a catastrophic landscape for governance, and they're going to have to make every move just so in order to come out with a governance victory in the end and be able to face the 2029 electorate proudly. So we'll see how that goes. Very interesting observations, and more time than I thought I would spend on overseas elections that I don't even understand. But given given trends both here and in Europe, you want to watch closely and cling to any movement away from the far right if you can, but apparently results not exactly letting us do that here. All right, let's see. Other things that I had put away, there are several others floating around here that are unidentified because they came directly from Blue Sky, but I think we got all the British election ones out there. There's, of course, plenty going on here in the United States with our own upcoming elections. And here, well, we're running up against our first break, but perhaps we can introduce this interesting theme, which is happening as Republicans gear up for their convention, which is coming just in a matter of days here. Tempers flare. That's because they're Republicans. They love shooting at people. Tempers flare as Trump reviews revised abortion plank for Republican platform. You'll recall, of course, that Republicans went without a platform entirely in 2020 because LOL YOLO, nothing matters, I guess. But this time they're going to have a platform. And this time they have, in fact, overturned Roe v. Wade. And everyone knows it. And it's been driving the results of electoral politics ever since. The former president, that's Trump, wants the platform to endorse leaving the issue to the states rather than have a federal ban in the wake of Roe v. Wade's demise. And it's a big fight because there are, of course, on the platform committee at least, lots and lots of true believers who absolutely positively see this as the moment to strike and get the national abortion ban they've always wanted. Trump has sort of mouthed that mantra all along in order to secure their support and have them back him. But of course, he, I guess, has seen, even he has seen the results, I assume, of what it's been like to run as a Republican in the atmosphere post-Roe, and says, my fake position that's supposed to make it look like I'm a moderate or something to people who don't pay attention. I don't think they read party platforms, though. But to make it look like I'm a moderate, I'll say, well, we'll leave it to the states. Of course, you know, when the states, those states that want to actually preserve the right to an abortion, they'll, of course, say, well, not like that. That's not how we meant. But we'll see how this fight comes out.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Oh. Hey, there we go. All right, come on, button. Welcome back, everybody. All right, a little fight with the mute button this time, and keeping an eye on the social media feeds and trying to see what exactly is happening here. And do I need to grab something else and throw it into, oh yes, right, I'll throw that into the mix. I guess I'll have to hang on to this one, and we'll have to, yesterday, having missed the show yesterday and taken the day off for celebrating America and, of course, our independence from Britain, which then took up the first segment of our, of our show. Some independence. Anyway, we got a couple of other stories to catch up on. But first, let's head back over to the new breaking and developing story, I guess, from the Republican Party. Again, tempers flare as Trump reviews revised abortion plank for Republican platform. Remember, the play here is Trump is trying to look like he might be moderate on abortion. So stop punishing the Republican Party, he's saying, for overturning Roe v. Wade, even though that has been our, you know, one of our core purposes for, 50 years or so. So he's looking to hide from it. Donald Trump has begun to review draft language for the 2024 Republican platform that anti-abortion leaders expect will abandon the party's decades-long call to amend the U.S. Constitution and to extend personhood protections to the unborn, according to multiple people involved in the discussions. The escalating behind-the-scenes disagreement over the abortion language has become so tense and acrimonious in recent weeks that they all killed one another. That would be great. But no, they have instead gotten to the point where some social conservative leaders have issued public warnings of a public split, a coming split within Trump's coalition. But of course, Trump will threaten to murder them, which is, of course, just a late-term abortion. And they'll come back, I guess, basically. Others have started to discuss an effort to issue a minority report to the platform at the convention, according to people involved, who, like others for this story, spoke on a condition of anonymity to describe private conversations, and because probably they fear being thrown out a window by Trump's brown shirts, essentially. Trump advisors, in turn, have been angered by the public pressure from anti-abortion activists, according to people familiar with the campaign's internal discussions. At the same time, Trump allies are not overly worried about the platform's skirmish because evangelicals strongly opposed to abortion have remained among his most fervent supporters, regardless of his evolving positions on the issue. It makes no sense, but that's where they are. If the Trump campaign decides to remove national protections for the unborn from in the GOP platform, it would be a miscalculation that would hurt party unity and destroy pro-life enthusiasm. Oh, we have a recording for that one.
Enthusiasms.
Yeah, destroy those enthusiasms between now and the election. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, said in a statement on Wednesday, "We are now just one business day away from the platform committee meeting, and no assurances have been made. Instead, every indication is that the campaign will muscle through changes behind closed doors." And they do that from time to time. The last time I recall was muscling through changes that said, we are not an anti-Russia party. We're not about pushing back on Russia. We're pro-Russian, and they can have Ukraine if they want it. Mysteriously inserted into the 2016 presidential campaign platform for no real reason. There were no delegates there who were anti-Ukrainian or pro-Russian, except for the incoming presidential nominee, who suddenly thought the one and only thing I want to change in this whole platform is let's reverse, the decades and decades of anti-Russian expansionism from the Republican Party. Oh, okay. Trump advisors who selected the platform committee's delegates have made clear in private discussions that they want a shorter platform document with abortion language consistent with Trump's current position, multiple people said, which is to say, he has no position. Since the Supreme Court in 2022 overturned the Roe v. Wade decision legalizing abortion nationwide, Trump waffled on whether he would support a federal abortion ban. But Trump now says he wants each state to make its own decision on abortion regulation while resisting calls for new federal limits that he once supported. Yes. Many states will be different. Oh, is this him? Okay, so he's saying it. Many states, they say very strongly, many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others. Yep, that's it. Of course, he probably meant be more conservative, but that's not what he said. Major alert. His cognitive abilities. Oh, my God. Why are we even... Yeah. That's just Trump being Trump, of course. But there you have it. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. Trump allies have argued that letting states decide their own abortion limitations helps the former president seem more moderate on the issue. Democrats contend that instead it weds Trump to the most extreme abortion limits in the country, including some states that have enacted near total bans on the procedure. In the face of the activist backlash, Trump's advisors have barred the press and C-SPAN cameras from next week's scheduled meetings of the platform committee, a break in tradition that has alarmed some delegates. Members of the Republican National Committee not directly participating in the platform debate will be able to attend the meetings, which start Sunday afternoon at the Baird Center in Milwaukee, with a meeting to offer amendments scheduled for Tuesday. Family Research Council President Tony Perkins, remember that guy? A platform committee member wrote a letter on Monday to RNC Chairman Michael Whatley. Remember, he's the co-chair along with, what's her name? Lara Trump. Dismissing the private discussions as stalling tactics by Trump advisors. He called the decision to restrict the press from the platform committee discussions un-American. Ooh, look out. And warned that the platform could be watered down to a few pages of meaningless, poll-tested talking points, which is frequently the case anyway. But I like that. We're not letting the press in. That's un-American. Oh, that's the way Ron DeSantis conducted his whole campaign. Oh, no. I can't believe it. We reached consensus, he says, by presenting our ideas and playing by the rules. And I am very concerned about closing down the process, Perkins said on Thursday. The Republican Party should not be operating, as we point out, the left so often does, wanting to silence opposition. Yeah, it's always the left silencing the opposition, not us, even though we're doing it right now. Every Republican accusation is a confession. They just think that that's happening on the left because reasons. They want to accuse the left of having done that. Maybe they have, maybe they have not. Doesn't matter. We're going to make that accusation anyway and then do it ourselves. The Trump campaign said the final abortion language has not been determined. Some campaign officials have suggested that the eventual language will appease many abortion or anti-abortion activists. We'll see. The platform committee has yet to convene to discuss what language should be in the final document. That was Danielle Alvarez, Trump campaign spokeswoman. I don't think we've heard her name yet. Trump signed a letter to anti-abortion leaders during his 2016 campaign, promising to support the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, federal legislation that would have outlawed abortion nationwide after 20 weeks, with some exceptions. He supported that legislation in his first term, but his policy changed after the Supreme Court overturned Roe. Anti-abortion activists reject the idea that the High Court's reversal changes the need for federal legislation or a constitutional amendment process, as they have expanded their efforts to challenge federal regulatory approval of abortion medication. They argue that a constitutional amendment on abortion, a feature of the GOP platform since the 1980s, can be seen as a state issue, since any amendment would ultimately need to be ratified by at least 38 of the 50 states. That's not really a state issue, but okay. They also say that Trump's recent statements on abortion fail to address the abortions performed in more liberal states that allow the procedure with relatively few limitations. 8 anti-abortion and social conservative leaders wrote a June 10th letter to Trump demanding that the platform include support for federal legislative limits on abortion, and it contained the following sentence: "We support a human life amendment to the Constitution and legislation to make clear that the 14th Amendment's..." Oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't exist anymore. Sorry. Well, the 14th Amendment's protections apply to children before birth. Well, that doesn't apply to anything. Sorry. Only parts of it, I guess, are still left. This one, maybe. This is the language that both you and Ronald Reagan ran on and won, the leaders wrote. Won with, really. But okay. Among these, they didn't say with. So, among the signatories were Dannenfelser, Perkins, Faith and Freedom Coalition President Ralph Reed, remember him? And Penny Nance, the president of Concerned Women for America. They're deeply concerned, these women. One anti-abortion activist involved in a discussion with Trump's team said there had been little recent communication with anti-abortion leaders beyond broad assurances that the platform will be fine and it will be pro-life. Don't look. Our posture was, let's fix this behind the scenes, this activist said. Once it became more apparent to us that they didn't want to work with us and seemed inclined to want to pick a fight with us, we have been more vocal. Some RNC members are also concerned that the Trump team will back away from the 2016 platform's declaration that denounced the Supreme Court's 2015 decision allowing same-sex couples to marry. The previous platform called marriage between one man and one woman the foundation of a free society. That has for millennia been entrusted with rearing children and instilling cultural values. Trump advisors say privately that they do not want a fight over same-sex marriage and consider it a settled issue not worth relitigating, according to people familiar with the conversations. It would not be a smart move to define it any other way, one RNC member said of marriage. I'm a little bit concerned about what might transpire. So there you have it. The upcoming fight over the platform. There's a little bit more discussion of it. And if I can find it again, I think Sarah Posner was very much involved in all of this and took a real interest in this story and put together this thread, and also included another article, a link to an article in Politico from the other day, if you'd like to go and check in on that one. The Washington Post, she says, has more. We just read it. On the story that was first in Politico the other day about the clashes between the Christian right and the Trump campaign / RNC on platform drafting. It's getting heated, but what will it amount to? The piece pretends, i.e., gives Trump a giant benefit of the doubt, that Trump has settled on abortion policy that conflicts with his base. Trump, according to the piece, wants to, quote, leave it to the states, and the Christian right / anti-abortion groups want national bans plus the personhood amendment. Trump has only hinted at this and has otherwise given a mishmash of answers when asked about it. At the debate, for example, he lied that the Biden Dem position includes murdering newborns and that he would somehow have a policy to prevent that, which doesn't happen, so, not going to happen policy-wise. Let's return to the visible anger among heavyweights on the Christian right, people like Marjorie Dannenfelser, Tony Perkins, and more. They're mad that the platform, at least from 2016, since there wasn't one in 2020, will be watered down. Perkins has been talking about this for weeks, including on his radio show, and he has been urging followers to pressure their RNC delegates. Trump's RNC has now blocked the media from the platform committee meetings, something Perkins calls un-American. We heard about that. She says, yes, I know, leopard-eating face, etc. Trump's RNC, as Politico reported earlier in the week, purged a few people from the platform committee. Did you know that? Who were seeking strict anti-abortion language, including one who was a longtime Republican operative deeply embedded in the evangelical community, one Chad Connolly. That, according to her analysis of the Politico piece, which she includes here and includes her post on it the other day, this could turn into a BFD. Also, Republicans in disarray over abortion, right? So, the public outrage from the Christian right is a huge gift to Trump, actually. She says it makes the rift between him and his extremist base visible to the public, giving him more ammunition to claim he's more moderate on abortion, even than his own party, and has power to transform the party itself. The Christian right has spent the last 8 years claiming Trump was the most pro-life and the most pro-religious liberty president ever. That was because of SCOTUS and Dobbs, and because of their personnel / policy flexes in his administration. Now they're incensed that he's moderating. But is he? And she puts it in quotes there, moderating. Evangelical leaders are also hinting the base will be deflated if the platform doesn't measure up on abortion, and also lower down in the Washington Post piece, marriage equality, which they want reversed. But it's hard to see the base being so deflated that they'd let Dems, who they portray as baby killers, win. Also, in part of because of the 8-year campaign of submitting to Trump, God's anointed, the base reveres Trump and trusts he will have their backs if in office again. Could this flex against the platform committee change that? I have my doubts because Trump is the party now. So it's very interesting to see. There is the split, but will the evangelical community essentially say, meh, what the hell? Either, well, he's God's anointed, what can you do? We'll vote for him anyway. We're certainly not voting for any Democrats. Or will they say, we think he's lying, but he's lying for our benefit. He's lying to the rubes who will believe, I'm angry. I'm not happy about the Republican position on abortion. Oh, it's been moderated now? Okay, I'm for that. Oh, okay, now he's in office. It was all a lie. It's going to swing back our way. And that was always the plan. Good. We believe it. But that's one of those things that con men frequently do to their cons, right? You're in on the con. Don't worry about it. This is for the other idiots. And it works on both. So, keeping an eye on things as their convention begins. All right, what else have I put away in pocket? There's plenty more, and on a lot of different subjects. It's Friday. We can perhaps go rather far-ranging here. Man, there's a lot. And another story that we have to catch up on, and I guess in some way, whose reporting shall I read about this one? This is difficult. But let me grab this. Can I read the full report here? It's the Independent, so I'm not quite sure. I might have to read the pocket version of it here. But something's happened over, mostly on Twitter, elsewhere on social media, yes, but it's not new information, but it's gained a virality, is that a word? That has garnered it new attention. And the Independent puts it this way, I think, in their headline: Donald Trump's alleged sexual proclivities, graphically detailed in new Epstein documents, except it is said that they are not new. They are, in fact, old, because Epstein's been dead for a while, by the way. And these revelations, such as they are, I guess, come from a very old now, relatively old lawsuit that was filed and refiled several times by one of the plaintiffs against Epstein in the civil suits, and who of course made criminal allegations as well. But one of the people who was at the time a very young underage girl held essentially in sexual slavery by Epstein, and who made specific allegations that included sexual abuse by Donald Trump. But in bringing the case to court, right at the last minute, essentially, no one knows exactly what happened, but the intimation from her lawyers was somebody has threatened her to the point where she now says, I'm too scared to bring the case. Just drop it. Please drop it and leave me out of the whole thing. Well, now I guess the filings from those suits have been publicly released and are generating some talk. The new papers, it says here, contain incendiary claims about the former president. And I don't know. I mean, I saw some of the screen grabs. I don't know what's in the Independent report, but we may have to be careful with some of this. Mike Bedigan is reporting this again for the Independent, and we'll see how much of it is visible to us. Looks like it might all be there. Graphic details about Donald Trump's alleged sexual proclivities have emerged in the latest round of court documents containing details of the late pedophile Jeffrey Epstein's associates. The new documents contain incendiary claims about the former president, including accusations that he had sexual relations with, quote, many girls, made by one of Epstein's alleged victims, Sarah Ransom, with an E on the end. Mr. Trump's name has appeared a handful of times previously in the documents, and while not accusing him of wrongdoing, appears to illustrate the good relationship he had with the disgraced financier, although later on it is in fact alleged that there's some wrongdoing, definitely some in circulation, maybe not in this first batch, I don't know. We'll see what they say here. In the newly unsealed documents, Ms. Ransom testified that her unnamed friend was one of the many girls that had sexual relations with Donald Trump, including at Epstein's New York townhouse. She confided in me about her casual, quote, friendship with Donald. Mr. Trump definitely seemed to have a thing for her, and she told me how he kept going on about how he liked, oh boy, her pert nipples, she testified. Now, this was a very young girl, but, young or not, you don't really want to hear that coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. But, okay, whatever. She then described in graphic detail, and we'll try and be careful here, how Mr. Trump allegedly caused pain to the victim's nipples, yikes, and claimed that she saw the resulting injury firsthand. My goodness. I also know she had sexual relations with Trump at Jeffrey's New York mansion on regular occasions, as I once met Jen for coffee just before she was going to meet Trump and Epstein together at his mansion. Monday's unsealed extracts were included in a letter sent by attorneys representing Alan Dershowitz, seeking to undermine Ms. Ransom's credibility. I don't think that worked out the way they meant. Ms. Ransom said that she had seen sex tapes involving prominent figures, including Prince Andrew, and UK billionaire Richard Branson. Mr. Trump was not alleged to have been involved in the sex tapes. You would think he would be careful about that. In a New Yorker article released in 2019, Ms. Ransom said that she had invented the tapes to draw attention to Epstein's behavior and had to make him believe that she had evidence that would come out if he harmed me. She did not appear to address the validity of other claims from the emails in her comments to the outlet. Stephen Chung, yeah, you remember him, spokesperson for Trump, of course, said, oh, no, none of this is true, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, do we really want to give any time over to his statement? We know what he's going to say. Other mentions of Trump in the document so far have not accused him of any illegality, but claims that he and Epstein were on good terms. In part of the testimony from another victim, Johanna Sjoberg, it was claimed that Epstein once called up the former president and visited one of his casinos after his private plane was diverted to Atlantic City in New Jersey. Ms. Sjoberg said that while traveling on the plane with the disgraced financier, the pilots had said they were unable to land in New York as planned. Jeffrey said, great, we'll call up Trump and we'll go to, I don't recall the name of the casino, but we'll go to the casino. I believe it was Trump Casino, but what, Trump Castle? I don't know. He had a couple of them. Anyway, elsewhere, Ms. Sjoberg was asked if she ever gave Mr. Trump a massage, to which she replied no. Several more mentions of Mr. Trump were made in the documents released last Friday when Mr. Alessi, not only did that name come up, I don't know, maybe I skipped it, testified he had driven Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, right, to the former president's Mar-a-Lago home. Mr. Alessi also said that Mr. Trump would sometimes come round for dinner at Epstein's home, but ate with Mr. Alessi in the kitchen. Mr. Trump did not get massages at the Palm Beach house because he had his own spa, Mr. Alessi said. Okay. Spokesperson for Branson's Virgin Group, funny enough, we categorically reject all the allegations made by Sarah Ransom, just like the Trump spokesperson. What else are you really going to say here? All right. Well, my recollection, and I didn't put any of these aside because they were, I don't know. I didn't really want to talk about it that much, but I definitely did see screen grabs of what looked like court documents circulating online elsewhere that I would say, well, given the age, the alleged age of the victim at the time, most certainly did describe wrongdoing, including Donald Trump's actual participation in these sexual assaults, because these kids were underage. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this has been in the common, in circulation for a long time, and the situation in the press. I don't know. For some reason, it's a much more interesting story to say that Joe Biden is old than it is to remind everybody, yes, Donald Trump is in fact a child rapist, and you should be talking about that. And maybe that's not a person you want to be, president of the United States. All right, let's see. Yesterday's big to-do, besides the, Independence Day celebrations, was an odd choice from the New York Times to run an opinion piece, it was an odd choice for Independence Day, regardless of the, the background of the writer, which came to be a source of controversy, let's say, all by itself. It was a guest essay in the Times, in the opinion column, Why I Won't Vote. And it was a very interesting day. The whole thing evolved interestingly. Why I Won't Vote. And I think they had a longer title at the beginning, and why you probably shouldn't either. And it was, a person who says that it was their practice never to vote. And it was among the dumber arguments I've ever seen for that. It doesn't matter. the two parties are stupid anyway. One vote never makes a difference. But it goes on basically to say, I'm not even sure democracy is a great idea anyway. Maybe we should have, some sort of dictatorship or monarchy, or I don't know. And apparently, though, he's a conservative, but a particular brand of conservative, a old school, Catholic conservative activist, editor of The Lamp, which is a conservative Catholic journal of sorts. Anyway, he's been writing on this subject for a while, a couple of times, but no mention in the Times piece of some of his more radical statements like, hey, democracy is stupid and it sucks anyway. I don't vote because I hate democracy. But as it turns out, well, for one thing, I was sort of concerned about, or interested in, well, why am I going to read a story that says, please don't listen to me? Please don't let me have a voice. I don't want you to hear what I have to say. All right, then I'm not going to read the article. As it turns out, it was pretty stupid. And the dumber part of it, even dumber than I would have guessed could have been possible at the time, was why I don't vote is you do vote. Somebody basically, his name is on here. He wrote the article as a byline. Let's look him up. And he lives in a relatively small town. So the likelihood that someone with his exact name, who was also born in the same year as him, is the culprit here, who was actually showing up in the 2020 and 2022 federal elections and casting a ballot. Probably not actually someone else just using his name. So the whole premise of the thing, why I don't vote and why you probably shouldn't either, was pretty ridiculous. But to print that on Independence Day, by the way, as a July 4th selection, when everybody's all about America and, of course, civic duty, and it's great because it's a democracy and we threw off a monarchy. And he's saying, no, let's go back to a monarchy. Let's stop voting. I mean, that was a weird thing to do for July 4th. But even worse, he's somewhere laughing his ass off at the New York Times. Ha! Those idiots printed it. I vote all the time. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. So, yeah, as it turns out, I was scrolling back to see if I don't think I actually commented directly on the article yesterday, but I certainly saw a lot of other people doing so and forwarded their thoughts on it. Who's this? Can I open this one up? Is this going to show me the name here? So it's Matthew R. Walther is the name of the author of this piece here. What was most interesting, though, was, well, one, that pretty quickly they found his voter file, and it did show, in fact, that he voted in the 2020 general election and the 2022 general elections in his, I guess now, hometown of Three Rivers, Michigan. It's a small place, very little likelihood of any mistakes being the case here, and I haven't seen any changes. But what was interesting was, I guess, finally the New York Times became aware of this, that they had run a headline on the thing that says, why I don't vote. And, and went on to say, you probably shouldn't either. And they found out, oh, he does vote. So, a lot of people pointing out, well, what you really do there is either put a major correction up or withdraw the article or something like that. But they found a better rhetorical trick. They switched the headline to why I won't vote. I did, but now I'm not going to, because the strongly held principles that I've been arguing for a decade, well, maybe less than a decade, he's a relatively young guy, weren't true in the last two federal elections, but they'll totally be true in this one. But rather than just simply say, we got fooled, a Republican operative handed us an op-ed and we decided to spend July 4th printing a don't vote message from a guy saying, I don't vote, I don't, but he does. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. The wheels are really coming off over at the New York Times. So that was pretty amazing, and that was something to see develop over the last 24 hours or so. It was a hell of an Independence Day edition, let's say. All right, let's see. A couple of other things that I thought I might want to throw in there. Oh, okay. Is that another? No, it's the same one earlier. Okay, let's see. Another Trump development that, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's worth keeping it in mind, but I mean, at some point, obviously we all have the feeling that, well, people are just going to ignore this. Trump is what he is. But just another piece of evidence to those of you paying some attention. Trump Organization, and I thought, hey, didn't they just lose a giant lawsuit? Yeah. Well, they need money, I guess. So Trump Organization signs up to put its brand, highly tarnished, but well, where could you work with this brand still? Well, how about Saudi Arabia? They're going to put its brand on a new Saudi tower. And of course, run for president at the same time. But I'm totally not going to do any foreign dealings or something like that. So he's sneaking them in between terms, of course. The residential high-rise tower in Jeddah is the latest of several developments that the former president's company has planned for the Middle East, a source of a considerable portion of their wealth. Now, used to be Russia, but now that's too dirty, so they're taking the money from Saudis and Emiratis instead. The Trump Organization, Eric Lipton reports, has signed a new deal with a Saudi real estate company to build a residential high-rise tower in the city of Jeddah, extending the family's close ties with the kingdom. Saudi Arabia has become one of the few reliable sources of growth for the Trump family's business operations, as new real estate deals in the United States have slowed or stopped since, I don't know, say about January 6, 2021. And, of course, the related assault on the Capitol, and since former President Trump left the White House. This new deal is like other international projects the Trump family has signed over the past decade. It offers the family's name and brand to a well-financed developer that will build the project and sell luxury residential units, it hopes, at a premium, based on the marketability of the former president's perceived star power. Although, if they read the report that I had read and didn't read to you aloud, because there's really no way to gently treat it, of the screen grabs of some of these court documents that are coming to light, well, I don't know. Maybe you would sell more basement dungeons, I suppose, in the building. But some people will buy it anyway, let's say. Anyway, other projects include a resort complex in Oman and Saudi-backed golf tournaments at Trump courses in recent years. We are delighted to strengthen our ongoing relationship with the Trump Organization and expand our portfolio by delivering premium properties to redefine Saudi Arabia's high-growth real estate market. Ziad El-Char, the chief executive of the real estate firm Dar Global, said in a statement on Monday. The target market, Mr. El-Char said, will be international investors and vacationers looking to buy real estate in Jeddah. And everybody's dying to get a condo in Jeddah, I guess. But, you can launder a lot of money that way. I assume they'll sell those to Russian oligarchs and the like, but also Middle Eastern oligarchs as well. Dar Global, based in London, is a subsidiary of Dar Al Arkan, one of the largest private real estate companies in Saudi Arabia, with a growing portfolio of projects in luxury markets around the world. The company typically teams up with well-known brands such as Dolce & Gabbana and Lamborghini as part of its pitch to deep-pocketed buyers. Before Mr. Trump was elected president in 2016, his organization had planned to build a tower in the Middle East, but the deal was shelved along with other development plans after Trump was elected and his family promised not to sign new international deals while he was in the White House. These branding deals have become a major source of new income for the Trump family, as the Trump Organization is typically paid several $1 million upon signing of these deals and then gets a cut of the luxury apartment sales or condo or apartment sales. We are thrilled to expand our footprint in the Middle East, Eric Trump said in a statement on Monday. The project in Oman includes a Trump-branded golf course and hotel, as well as Trump villas in a development that Dar Global is building on land owned by the government of Oman on a cliff overlooking the Gulf of Oman. That one deal alone earned the Trump family at least $5 million even before the construction started last year, financial disclosure documents show. Last year, a team of sales agents invoked Mr. Trump's name to help sell luxury villas at prices of up to $13 million, mostly targeting super rich buyers from around the world, including from Russia, Iran, and India. Terrific. Another major source of new revenue, of course, for the Trump family has been Live Golf, right? The professional league backed by Saudi's sovereign wealth fund. The fund paid the Trump family to host one of its tournaments at the Trump National Doral near Miami earlier this year. Trump's two oldest sons, Eric and Don Jr., had expressed frustration at the previous promise to do no new international deals, and it is unclear if they will continue to seek them if Trump returns to the White House, because F everything, why not? There's no reason to not do them now that Trump can't be held liable for anything or charged for anything. Might as well go for it. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund is also the primary investor in the investment firm that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, set up after he left his post at the White House. These deals have raised allegations of conflicts of interest, because they are conflicts of interest, particularly the deals directly involving foreign government entities, as the foreign players may be offering the Trump family special terms in exchange for potential favored treatment from Mr. Trump if he is back in power. If he were to become president again, this would be a profound conflict of interest, said Robert Weissman, president of Public Citizen, which has tracked the Trump family's business deals when he was in office. But you didn't have to even track anything to know that that's a conflict of interest. While Dar al-Arkan is technically a private company traded on the Saudi Stock Exchange, it relies in part on Saudi government contracts to sustain its business. So that's the next round of corruption that we're all in for if Trump is returned to office. And of course, if he's not returned to office, one, I'd be astonished because he doesn't really care whether he wins the election or not in terms of seizing power. But two, he would continue to trade on the threat of taking power or flexing his muscle to affect American politics on behalf of these investors who are stuffing his pockets anyway. So there you go. Something to keep an eye on. Let's see other interesting developments from the business world. I want to throw this thing in here. This is actually causing a considerable stir outside of the realm of pure electoral politics, but of course, because everything is political, and this is as political as anything else. This story covered widely. I happened to grab the NBC News story about it from, it's in fact an NBC News run of a Associated Press story. I went to the byline. It's the AP story. NBC gives it this headline: Black Farmers Association. The Black Farmers Association calling for Tractor Supply Company's CEO to resign. Why? Because the company has decided to make a very public cut in its DEI efforts. They've been caught up in the right-wing frenzy of DEI is the new CRT, and you got to get rid of it, even though this was, generally speaking, good for business and good for, not only did they do well business-wise, but they do well for themselves in hiring a diverse crowd so that they can appeal to a diverse audience. But something, we don't like it anymore. The company said it would eliminate all of its diversity, equity, and inclusion roles and withdraw its goals for reducing carbon emissions. Okay, what's going on here? The National Black Farmers Association has now called on Tractor Supply Company's president and CEO to step down after the rural retailer announced that it would drop most of its corporate diversity and climate advocacy efforts. It's a very interesting thing. I mean, based on this weird and I think erroneous assumption that they must have decided to go with, who really shops? Who's the basic profile of our customer at Tractor Supply? And, you could very easily go to, white rural buyers, right? Yes, true. That's probably a lot of them. But it's this weird, I don't know, they have this weird myopia about, like, who's really doing farm work, though, really? Is it really the white population or not? And the answer is actually not. But anyway, the resignation demand emerged as Tractor Supply, which sells products ranging, of course, from farming equipment to pet supplies, faces a deepening backlash over its decision, which itself came after conservative activists spoke out against the company's work to be more socially inclusive and to curb climate change. Now, if you're a farmers, like, actually, you know, the reality of climate change probably should concern you. Now, you may be a rural white conservative farmer and be inclined to think that, you know, you should sign on to the climate change is a hoax agenda. But it's burning your crops to death in the field. Are you really going to just ignore that reality? So it made some sense for Tractor Supply to say, all right, well, for one thing, a considerable amount of farm work is done by non-whites. And two, climate change is killing our industry. Why not pay some attention to those things? But I guess they weren't counting on the strength of MAGA hypnosis of the farming community. In a public announcement last week, the company said it would eliminate all of its diversity, equity, and inclusion roles, end sponsorship of, quote, non-business activities like pride festivals, and withdraw its goals for reducing carbon emissions. Critics of the new position argue that Tractor Supply is giving in to hate and harming its customers by abandoning crucial principles. I was appalled by the decision. John Boyd Jr., president and founder of the National Black Farmers Association, said in an interview, I see this as rolling back the clock with race relations because the country is so divided on race, especially in rural America. Tractor Supply declined to comment further when reached on Tuesday. Tractor Supply, which has its headquarters in Brentwood, Tennessee, operates over 2,200 stores across the United States, most of them located in rural areas. The retailer's core customer base consists of shoppers in need of farm and ranch products, such as livestock feed, trucking supplies, tools, and outdoor equipment. Boyd said Tractor Supply stores can be found where much of NBFA's 130,000 members are located. Like other farmers, he said, black farmers have shopped at the chain for years. Boyd, who is also a Tractor Supply shareholder, estimated personally spending more than $10,000 at his local store since January alone, buying supplies like fencing wire and feed for his cattle and horses in Virginia. Before the company's announcement, conservative activists opposed to DEI efforts, sponsorship of LGBTQ plus events, and climate advocacy had spent weeks criticizing Tractor Supply on social media. Tractor Supply said in its Thursday statement that it was making the changes after hearing from disappointed customers and took this feedback to heart. They made the mistake, of course, of believing that Twitter was real life. The decision marked a significant shift in messaging from Tractor Supply, which once touted its diversity and inclusion efforts. In recent years, the company has been trying to broaden its appeal to younger consumers, including former city dwellers it is at risk of now alienating. We will continue to listen to our customers and team members. Your trust and confidence in us are of the utmost importance, and we don't take that lightly, the company said. NBFA said it made repeated attempts to discuss its concerns with Tractor Supply President and CEO Hal Lawton before calling for his resignation. He's gone too far, and we have to let him know that we're not going to sit back and take this mess anymore, Boyd said, adding that the organization may consider calling for a boycott of Tractor Supply if nothing changes in coming days. We're tired of being mistreated by the government and Fortune 500 companies. Black farmers are going to start fighting back, and that's what we're doing. Some customers already have decided to take their business elsewhere, including Squirrelwood Equine Sanctuary, a New York animal sanctuary that says it spends more than $65,000 annually on livestock feed and other supplies at Tractor Supply. Squirrelwood co-founder Beth Hyman said she first heard about the company's decision when the sanctuary's supporters reached out to ask if the group planned to make a statement about it. She thought about it for a day and then went to her local store. to ask a manager whom she's worked with for years about the announcement. Hyman, who is gay, said she told the manager the sanctuary could no longer support Tractor Supply if its announcement reflected its beliefs. The sanctuary also posted its stance on Twitter, where the post has received 31,000 likes. It's mind-boggling to me that a company would cave to basically a hate campaign, Hyman said. Now they just have another boycott on their hands. We didn't call for that, but obviously people are. Alan Adamson, co-founder of marketing consultancy Metaforce, said the conservative pressure on Tractor Supply and the fallout from giving in was the perfect example of how the increasing split in the country, politically and ideologically, have made it really hard to run consumer-facing businesses. No matter which way you go in this, you're going to upset big chunks of customers, he said. Consumers of all backgrounds are becoming more influenced by social media and choosing to redirect their spending if they feel like companies don't align with their values, Adamson said. With the case of Tractor Supply, whose business is tethered to rural communities, anti-DEI activism put the retailer in a really tricky situation where it had to do something to stop a potential exodus, he said. No company wants to be the target of negativity on social media. It's a no-win situation. Tractor Supply's reversal follows boycott campaigns against Bud Light and Target last year over their LGBTQ plus marketing. Target decided not to carry Pride Month merchandise in all its stores in June, following last year's backlash. I didn't even realize that. Legal attacks against the company's diversity and inclusion efforts have also drawn more attention following the Supreme Court's 2023 ruling to end affirmative action in college admissions. Many conservative and anti-DEI activists have been seeking to set a similar precedent in the working world. A handful of other organizations and patrons of Tractor Supply have also expressed disappointment or outrage over the company's recent announcement, which included plans to no longer submit data to the Human Rights Campaign, the largest advocacy for LGBTQ plus rights in the U.S. Eric Bloom, perhaps, B-L-O-E-M, Vice President of Programs and Corporate Advocacy at Human Rights Campaign, said in a statement last week that Tractor Supply is turning its back on their own neighbors with this short-sighted decision. The organization had worked with Tractor Supply to create inclusive policies and practices for years, he added. But Boyd of the National Black Farmers Association said despite years-long efforts by the NBFA, Tractor Supply did not consult the group on past diversity and inclusion goals or participate in the organization's conferences. The company recently invited NBFA to apply to be a partner of Tractor Supply's company foundation, but the organization learned on June 26th, one day before Tractor Supply's announcement on its DEI and climate goals, that it was not among the groups selected, he said. So, interesting pressures on them, but yes, probably making the mistake of believing Twitter is real life and hearing from noisy, squeaky wheels that you need to end DEI and other outreach programs because reasons, and they went ahead and did it thinking, well, our base is white and rural. But yeah, increasingly, like as they said, urban dwellers or people moving out. I mean, it's like the hottest trend in the world, too. How many people are, I mean, such a hot market sector, it seems, of like, you know, look, it's basically pretty twee stuff, but, you know, the farmer's market, farm to table, and, you know, all sorts of artisanally farmed and created products, whether, you know, actual produce or finished goods that are made with I don't know, organic, locally raised, et cetera, ingredients and components, and there's a lot of money being spent on people who don't fit the traditional farmer demographic, but a farmer's a farmer. If you move out to the country and buy a farm and start raising bees, and you've got a rural artisanal meadery happening and taking your product to market in these new fancy upscale farmers markets, etc., but are buying all of your supplies from Tractor Supply Company or now having to find another supplier, you know, you're a customer too. I think that their demographics may not be what they used to be, and they may not have a real grasp of where they were going. So hopefully this will either have them correct course or, I don't know, be destroyed, I guess. So interesting, and makes a good Friday story, I thought. All right, let's see. A couple other stories that are out here to be sure to. What day, indeed what Friday, would be complete without an Amanda Marcotte story? And the answer is, well, any of them. But we don't like going without Amanda Marcotte stories for very long. It's not a conscious effort. It's just she just kind of lives in our space, and we're glad for it, too. So what's she up to now at Salon Magazine? Project 2025. Everybody's talking about it in our circles. But guess what? The story here is people outside of our circles are talking about it, too. Project 2025 was supposed to boost Donald Trump's campaign, says the headline, but it may be backfiring instead, and I would love that. Trump's authoritarian game plan is breaking through the post-debate noise, and it's starting to scare people. That's a good diversion from the post-debate noise. Here's what she's got. When Project 2025 was released, a number of progressives expressed surprise that Donald Trump's army of authoritarian schemers would boldly publish their plan to destroy American government as we know it. Yeah, it seems like you'd want to do secrets on that. The over 900-page document commissioned by the people expected to run another Trump White House, and remember, they only want things in like 3 pages or less. But they have a 900-page document. It's a laundry list of the far right's most politically toxic ideas, from banning abortion nationwide, we talked about that on the platform side, to firing or mass firing federal officials who believe in protecting public health and safety. Schedule F, right? One would think that Trump and his allies would try to keep their sinister plans out of public view. Instead, Team Trump published their fascistic blueprint on a website for anyone to read. They even proudly display the menacing Project 2025 label on the front page. By the way, big breakthrough, I think. I don't know if, again, I'd be mistaking Twitter for real life if I thought this was the case. But it seemed to me like there was an awful lot of discussion of and circulation of John Oliver's particularly good and insightful segment show entirely, really, on Project 2025 and the Schedule F situation. It seemed like it was resonating in the circles I get to see. But I think it's Amanda's point here that it's broken out beyond there. But now, so what about this point she was making? Why aren't they keeping it a secret? Why publish it and talk about it so loudly? Well, she says it's really not that surprising. The MAGA right learned years ago the value of hiding their wicked plans in plain sight. Authoritarian thought leader Christopher Rufo, brought up many times on this show, is the most prominent example. He frequently speaks loudly of his machinations, such as boldly announcing on Twitter that the right is trying to take away birth control, claiming women should not have, quote, recreational sex. Recently imprisoned Trump ally Steve Bannon gloated openly on his podcast about his schemes. Before going to prison, he bragged to the New York Times, "This is a military headquarters for a populist revolt." This prison. Kevin Roberts, whose group Heritage Foundation, ever heard of him, is helping run Project 2025, recently spoke about how Trump will use violence to force the MAGA agenda on the public. This embedded tweet from Biden-Harris HQ, borrowing his video confession and saying, yeah, Trump's Project 2025 leader saying, "We are in the process of a second American revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be." It's all on you, leftists. If you resist, well, then it's going to be bloody. If you surrender, it can be bloodless. Great. Trump himself regularly employs this strategy, giving speeches where he declares that his goal is, quote, retribution against political opponents. He promises pardons for the January 6th insurrectionists and characterizes anyone who objects to any of this as vermin who need to be eliminated. This strategy works because it depends on the fact that most Americans don't pay close attention to politics. They will never learn that Trump and his allies are saying such vile things. So, the MAGA goal with this bad guy posturing is twofold. First, get the juices flowing for their base. Second, cause those progressives who are paying attention to panic. Trumpists then paint the people speaking out as a bunch of liberal crazies who are exaggerating the threat of MAGA. I often liken it to a guy who pinches a woman's butt in a bar, and when she protests, he laughs and insists she's just a crazy lady making it all up. We saw this strategy with the Supreme Court's recent presidential immunity decision. It's factually correct that it gives Trump a license to kill. But anyone who speaks this fact is accused of Trump derangement syndrome and madness by Republicans. That's true. We've already seen that in action. There's more to it, of course, but we'll take a short break, regroup, breathe, maybe drink water, do various functions of life, and then come right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. So I breathed and I drank water. Those were the functions of life that we were talking about. There are other functions of life that I guess you could accomplish inside of 2 minutes, but that's not what's going on here, and we're not talking about that. Just relaxing and getting a little hydration in. All right, so where were we? We were talking about, or we were reading through Amanda Marcotte's latest, I think, on growing public awareness of Project 2025, what it means. People are starting to kind of get the picture, and that maybe for once, finally, it might backfire on these guys to use their usual basic strategy of loudly proclaiming this stuff ahead of time. And particularly for Chris Rufo, he's been laughing his way all the way to the bank for a couple of years now, saying the clearest exposition possible of his goals, including, I am going to say that we are going to do these things so that, and then I am going to deny it when the newspapers call me for confirmation, and they will print my denial, and then we will implement exactly this, and we'll all have a huge laugh in the face of these newspapers that are full of libtards and idiots. And they go ahead nonetheless and call him, and he denies it, and they print the denial, sometimes including an embedded picture of the tweet where he says, I'm going to purposefully deny all of this. It's very puzzling. But let's see. The strategy largely works, as they say, because less politically engaged Americans assume that both sides engage in hyperbole. Low information people are ready to believe the false accusations that liberals are deranged when they warn of Trump's plans to be a dictator. Project 2025 seemed to be rolled out with this assumption, that normies would never hear of it, and that the few who did hear would dismiss the fears as overheated nonsense. Instead, however, there are promising signs that people who aren't political junkies are starting to hear about Project 2025. Even better, those folks aren't immediately dismissing it as progressive theatrics, but maybe genuinely alarmed. On Saturday, I just heard about this the other day, and I missed it entirely for reasons that will become playing in just a moment. On Sunday, when I was busy doing as little as possible, actress, I don't even know the actress. Actress Taraji Henson. Is that right? Taraji. I hope I got that right. Taraji. I'm sorry, and I'd probably be familiar with her if I saw her too. I'm not great with the names, but maybe not. But it was during the BET Awards, which, okay, admittedly, I don't watch award shows generally. The BET Awards, among them, not something I typically watch, but okay, here's what happened at this one. Taraji Henson took a break during the BET Awards, which she was hosting. This is the host. To speak out about Project 2025. I should have been watching the BET Awards. There was the better political commentary there than in most of the places I was looking. Certainly on Sunday, but I was looking to avoid political commentary at that point. But I would love to see. Well, it's embedded here. You can take a look. A tweet from the Tennessee Holler, a source we have heard from before. Their embedded tweet has the video on this. This is something. Taraji Henson took a break during the BET Awards, which she was hosting, and said, "The Project 2025 plan," she named it, "is not a game. Look it up," she told viewers. That's a handy tool, right? "I'm talking to all the mad people that don't want to vote. You're going to be mad about a lot of things if you don't vote." That's a good point, certainly. And here's the tweet from the Tennessee Holler. Taraji P. Henson. There's a P in there. So I wonder if she includes that like... is it Michael D. Jordan? I mean, the middle initial is important to them. So, they put it in there and want people to use it. Helps them stand out. So Taraji P. Henson tweeting, "You better show up and show out when it's time to vote. It's about making decisions that will affect us as human beings. Project 2025 is not a game." There you go. And then an embedded video of her saying it. I mean, we know the quote, so I don't know. Maybe I don't play the audio of it, but the clip went viral one way or another. It ends up going viral, amplified by other celebrities like, Mark Ruffalo. Okay, there you go. Well done there. So the MAGA forces swung into action on social media, accusing Henson and Ruffalo. Is it Ruffalo? Ruffalo? I don't know. Anyway, accusing them and other progressives of making it all up, you see. Is Project 2025 in the room with you? A blue-checked user sneered under Ruffalo's tweet. These efforts at gaslighting people run against a real problem, however. The drafters of Project 2025 seek to promote their authoritarian playbook. Thus, a simple Google search generates a slew of explainers from various news organizations, with even more coming out rapidly as a response to the rising number of people asking, what is this Project 2025? We received a flood of reader inquiries asking if Project 2025 was a real effort. The fact-checking team at Snopes wrote in their lengthy explainer published Tuesday, although they've had their problems lately. Google Trends confirms that the number of searches for Project 2025 has grown dramatically in recent days. Henson's speech juiced the search rate, but this data shows interest levels were rising before her speech last Sunday. Earlier this month, John Oliver did a segment about Project 2025 on his HBO show, though the boost of interest from that was modest. His audience tends to be people who are already politically engaged and have heard about the initiative in the news. Perhaps more importantly, President Joe Biden's campaign has started a big media push to raise awareness, starting with a website last week that offers a taste of Trump's Project 2025 with bullet points like takes away reproductive freedom nationwide and terminates the Constitution. Well, that'll do it. The campaign projected a QR code around Atlanta on Thursday that sends people to the site. There have also been a few TikTok videos garnering millions of views that break down what Project 2025 is and what a threat it is to ordinary people. Here's one right now. Who's this one? Oh, Brian Tyler Cohen. We've heard that name called out before as well. Perhaps one of the most telling signs that this is beginning to backfire on Trump, however, is the way the MAGA forces on social media are starting to freak out. As Democratic activist and researcher Will Stansel pointed out, the MAGA people who pretended to be leftists to sow confusion online are busy at work trying to pretend Project 2025 is a Biden thing. How do you like that? Here's a tweet from Will Stansel saying Project 2025 was starting to go viral among low social trust types. So suddenly there's this crop of memes from sketchy anonymous left-wing accounts about how Project 2025 can't be stopped by voting for Biden. This is pretty obviously foreign interference. And, using some, a meme I'm not familiar with, but basically saying voting will not prevent the implementation of Project 2025. I don't know how you're supposed to believe that, but dumb people believe a lot of things. Perhaps the right's mistake was giving the initiative the name Project 2025, which sounds like something out of a dystopian sci-fi novel. Trump's in-house team has the same urge, as they have Agenda 47, a lighter weight version of the same fascistic game plan. Trump's campaign likely went with scary-sounding names on purpose, both to thrill their sadistic foot soldiers and to cause liberals to react fearfully. But those monikers also make them memorable enough to break into the consciousness of people who aren't paying close attention in a way that, like, Schedule F probably doesn't, right? Swing voters and people who aren't sure yet if they're going to vote are starting to hear about Project 2025, and they do not like it. That's not how this was supposed to work. Even in early June, polling showed only a quarter of Americans had heard of Project 2025, and it was, for a time, working as likely intended to motivate hardcore MAGA people and alarm partisan Democrats, all without even being noticed by the everyday people who still haven't made a choice or of who to vote for or whether to vote. All right. Here, an embedded tweet from Mother Jones saying a recent poll found that 76% of voters said they had heard a little or nothing about Project 2025. Considering it's an out-in-the-open scheme to get not only get Trump back in office, but steer the U.S. toward far-right autocracy, that's not a good thing. Now, she concludes there hasn't been new polling data yet, but this spike of interest suggests that there's a strong chance that the sands are shifting if the chatter about Project 2025 continues in both the press and social media, and I guess it's your job to help do that. The knowledge of Trump's plans might start to influence the election in ways he will not like. Trump cannot win without a large percentage of voters backing him under the false belief that he's, quote, not so bad. The more they find out about what he intends to do in office, the more they will have second thoughts about risking another Trump term. I hope that's true, and I hope we can make that a reality. Okay, let's see. Let's double back to Pocket and see what other things we have to share. I just got something in from our correspondent pal, Christine on 16, who sends a Facebook post from one Rebecca Solnit. And it is on the subject of, the email title line here from her is on jumping the gun on Biden's cognitive decline. It's been interesting watching this develop over the last couple of days, and I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, you could say this is beginning to snowball because additional elected Democrats are joining the call for loudly and openly saying Trump ought to step aside. But I think I caught this morning's news on the radio as I was waking up of a third congressional Democrat. And honestly, you should be up to like 16 by now if you want to be talking about a snowball effect. This is pretty slow, but maybe the ball hasn't really started rolling here yet. And then, of course, it was interesting to see yesterday, I think people were circulating a new Economist magazine cover, which was immediately attacked as ageist and ableist. I mean, yes and no to some extent, but it was the cover image was a walker with a presidential seal on it and saying, this is no way to run a country, it struck me as, well, I mean, first, there was a debate over whether it was ageist and ableist. Ableist, I guess, yes. Ageist, there was some pushback on, like, hey, when you're in your 80s, things do start to change. It's a reality. Of course, it's not the same for everyone, and some of these changes for others start in their 60s and 70s, but that wasn't really the point. Although my interest was they could have run this same headline on a picture of a golf cart and an out to lunch sign hanging off the corner of the Resolute desk for 4 years prior, but I don't believe they ever took that opportunity. That was no way to run a country. Anyway, this piece here, Christine shares and says, look, are we ageist or is Biden in decline? Let's wait for the data. And here's a long Facebook post, but it's a Friday, so maybe we can squeeze it in. And the topic is, of course, timely and ripe, as she says. And let's take a quick look at it. Why not? Did I open up the right one here? There are two. What am I looking at here? Is this a different page? No, I think it's the same. But okay. So let's just read this one quickly. Rebecca Solon says, as you may have noticed, I'm big on the benefit of the doubt, aka there's more truth and knowledge in knowing that you don't know than pretending you do. The pundits pretending to be neurologists with a specialty in gerontology that qualifies them to condemn Biden's brain don't actually have either the expertise or the evidence to reach the conclusions they are airing. Although some people who actually are gerontologists do say the same thing. Although, generally speaking, there's always the caveat of, well, it's not wise to remotely diagnose anybody, particularly people who are not your patients. So officially speaking, we don't know. But, I actually do know what I'm talking about. Not me, but others who know what they're talking about who say, well, yeah, I recognize some serious signs here. There is that. But there's also a lot of remote diagnosis going on, and that's never a good idea. But there's in a sort of mass hysteria bandwagon to sabotage the current alternative to Trump, which is as dangerous as it is familiar from the 2016 election. Meanwhile, fascism is staring us in the face in the person of a man so dim. I mean, he was dumb before he started to decline, Donald Trump. A man so dim he keeps boasting he did well on the kind of cognitive test given when they're actually worried about your brain. In 2020, President Trump again sought to showcase his mental fitness on television by reciting over and over again in an interview broadcast on Wednesday evening that what he said was a sample cognitive testing sequence. Remember, person, woman, man, camera, TV. The New York Times, which has been running a concerted campaign in both news and opinion sections since at least February to convince the public that Biden is incompetent, has led the way. This is not my argument that Biden is the best candidate, though he's certainly the best placed candidate in that he's not so easy to get a new one. It's not so easy to get a new one up and running at this stage. It's my argument that a whole lot of high profile, mostly men, are suffering from too much faith in their own belief in their superior objectivity and cool rationality, which is too often why they're exceptionally unaware of the feelings and motives driving them and why they're jumping on the bandwagon. They seem to suffer from a particular kind of memory impairment. How, with the same strategies, they, and yeah, sometimes it's some of the same pundits, helped undermine a candidate running against a fascist 8 years ago, led by the same newspaper. It's a point. I have come across several people who are in fact qualified in the relevant areas, and their opinions and some of the criteria for those opinions follow. A number of actual experts piped up to say Biden's lifelong stuttering disability often has a little-known related symptom called cluttering, which I hadn't heard of. They thought it could explain some of his debate performance, and I have taken a look. I've seen some clips now, and this rings true-ish for me. Cluttering is a speech disorder characterized by rapid or irregular speaking consisting of atypical pauses, repetitions, and disfluencies, resulting in a breakdown in speech clarity and organization. In contrast, stuttering is a speech disorder characterized by the repetition of sounds or words and disruptions in the flow of speech. Some of the speech experts note that in such a situation, trying to manage a speech impediment consumes some of the mental energy that would otherwise be focused on formulating thoughts. Meanwhile, there was an essay this spring by an actual gerontologist in the LA Times who says that Biden shows normal signs of aging. And that is probably true, but that can be concerning too, of course. Normal, it's not that it's abnormal, it's that it's normal and we should be expecting it already. Dr. Stone writes, first, memory. I explain to patients that there are three components to consider. One is formation, then storage, and finally recall. The most common issue among seniors is slow recall. This is the familiar tip of the tongue phenomenon. When a word seems to hide or a name won't come to mind, you know the game. It's in your bank of memories. It only just can't be accessed quickly. Given time, it usually arrives. This problem, called age-associated memory impairment, often starts for people in their 30s and gradually progresses. It's a nuisance, but not disabling. If you, or if like me, you find yourself using the term whatchamacallit, you probably have it. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Two other medical experts on aging, with their bios included below, but we won't necessarily read those, wrote this piece. There is no clinical evidence for cognitive decline in President Biden. Despite armchair gerontologists declaring otherwise, it may be tempting to conclude that such evidence does not exist because an extensive battery of diagnostic assessments of cognitive functioning has not been ordered, to our knowledge, by his personal physician, and if done, something significant might be revealed. But presidents are evaluated by their physicians, just like everyone else. Cognitive functioning tests are not done unless the physician suspects a problem, or if requested by the patient. Even then, a screening test of cognitive function is done first, followed by other more in-depth diagnostic assessments if the screen shows a worrisome score. Since Biden's personal physician seems not to have felt cognitive screening testing was medically indicated, this represents evidence, of sorts anyway, that such issues are unlikely to be present, consistent with his family's history of dementia-free longevity. It is also common to mistake Biden's lifelong speech impediment for cognitive decline, his cough for an inability to speak clearly, his changed gait for a man in significant decline, as occasionally misstatement as a sign of mental decay, etc. Each of us bears our own challenges with age. That is not a reason to dismiss and discard. It's a recognition that along with the privilege of a long life come changes that require adaptation. We see them in Biden because he's under a 24/7 spotlight. Place the same bright light on the media on any of the rest of us at any age, and few would survive the scrutiny without a similar negative profile. Then identifications of who are the experts offering. This was Dr. Bradley Wilcox, MD, professor and director of research at the Department of Geriatric Medicine at John A. Burns School of Medicine, University of Hawaii, and S.J. Olshansky, PhD, professor at the School of Public Health at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and a research associate at the Center on Aging at the University of Chicago. So yes, maybe no. It's an interesting entree, and stands, though, in contrast to this other offering, which I have to at least acknowledge is out there and increasingly in circulation. In New York Magazine, Olivia Nuzzi, whose name we've definitely called on the show before, although my recollection was that we weren't always particularly happy with the clarity and objectivity of Olivia Nuzzi, but I'm not positive that that's the case. But I wish Greg were here to give me feedback on that one, but the name rings a bell, and not always in a positive sense. But she has a piece here which goes hard in the opposite direction. The conspiracy of silence to protect Joe Biden is what's alleged here. That's in the headline. That's going to be damaging. The president's mental decline, as she puts it, was like a dark family secret for many elite supporters. And it's the sort of story that confirms a lot of priors, and you should take a look at it. It's very long, and we're not going to be able to make it through it. And I don't think we'll even be able to make through a significant enough chunk of it to really make it worth starting. But I must acknowledge that this is out there, and a lot of people will be reading it over the weekend, and we may have to deal with it by Monday. So you're on notice. I will include it in the roundup. Scott's out today, too. So I personally will include it in the roundup and give it to you to read over the weekend. Like watching the debate, I think it becomes necessary. You got to hear this story laid out, even if you're inclined to reject it or reject parts of it. You should know what you're talking about and take a look at it. All right, let's see. Other stories that I thought, why don't we squeeze this one in here? This one, I think, on a theme we have touched upon on the show a number of times in the past. An article in The Guardian George Monbiot, Monbiot, I'm not certain how you would pronounce it, Monbiot, an opinion piece on, well, is there any description of our author here, perhaps down at the bottom? No, yes. Well, just a Guardian columnist, but I guess one I haven't run into before. Here's an interesting thing from a European perspective, but touching on the theme we have hit upon before in the show, political union with Russia to own the globalists. That's my trademarked theme on this. He writes under the headline, I never thought I'd argue for rearmament, but a looming Trump presidency changes everything. This is interesting. A Putin-friendly president would pose a grave danger to Europe. Like it or not, this calls for greater defense. And an interesting art card here illustrating this thing, a United States flag as suit cuff here, and a hand shaking with, a U.S. and Russian handshake here with a dove of peace crushed in between them. You get the picture. Soon after Labor forms a government, and I guess that's happening now, it will find itself in a new world. It now seems likely that Donald Trump will win the presidency of the United States. Oh dear. If he does, this should bring an end to our abiding fantasies about a special relationship. Yeah, the U.S.-UK relationship. Wow. It was always, he says, an illusion. After the astonishing heroic intervention of the U.S. in the Second World War preserved us, the UK, from invasion and fascism, we built a romantic fairy tale of enduring love. But both countries act in their own interests. While the UK and Europe have lent on the U.S. for security, the dominant power has long used us, the UK, as an instrument of policy. Remember, this whole thing being written from a British perspective, so the pronouns and such and possessives are to be understood that way. Our joint enterprise has often been devastating to other people. Take, to give just a few examples, the U.S.-UK coup that overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh of Iran in 1953. The 20-year war in Afghanistan, the 2003 Iraq war that almost went on in 20 years, or the staunch support offered by Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak for the unfolding genocide, as he puts it, in Gaza. Our countries have also collaborated in developing a global trade and legal regime that favors capital over the democratic state. One example is a system known as investor-state dispute settlement, which grants offshore courts primacy over national sovereignty. That's an esoteric entry there. But if Trump is installed in the White House again, whatever way he might use to do it, the U.S. government, always a questionable friend, is likely to become a clear threat to our peace, security, and well-being. It will rip up what remains of global security and détente, environmental and human rights agreements, and international law. The age of multilateralism, flawed as it always was, would be over, and something much worse will take its place. In short, the UK and Europe will need to find the means of defending ourselves against a Trump regime and its allies. We might also need, as the lessons of the past century are unlearned and the far right rises again, we may need to defend ourselves against each other. Trump has developed a special relationship, not with us, but with Vladimir Putin, to whom he defers as the iron dictator he would like to be. Russia sought to help Trump win in 2016, tried again in 2020, and has long backed Trump for 2024. As if in return, when he was president, Trump announced that he trusted Putin ahead of U.S. intelligence agencies. Subsequently, he praised Putin for his invasion of Ukraine and has stated that he would encourage Russia to attack any NATO member that doesn't spend heavily on defense. One result of this special relationship is that Trump, if elected, is likely to end U.S. military support for Ukraine. This means that if European nations don't step up, Putin will be able to complete his invasion. It seems unlikely that he'll stop there. A Kremlin memo last year announced that Russia would take symmetrical and asymmetrical measures necessary to suppress such unfriendly acts as the use of sanctions. In February, the Danish defense minister warned that Russia could launch an attack on a NATO country within 5 years. Poland, the Baltic states. With a supporter in the White House and the possible collapse of NATO, why would Putin not pursue his advantage? Ukraine's strongest ally in Western Europe, Emmanuel Macron, is now flailing, while Putin's friends in Hungary, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Slovakia sense that history is on their side. When circumstances change, so should our positions, however disquieting it might be. I have long called for disarmament. This made sense when the Ministry of Defense concluded in 2003 that there are currently no major conventional military threats to the UK or NATO. It is now clear that we no longer need to retain a capability against the reemergence of a direct conventional strategic threat. And when NATO decided a few years later that a large-scale conventional aggression against the alliance will be highly unlikely, but that situation has changed. With great discomfort, I find myself open to arguments for rearmament. I now believe we need to enhance our conventional capabilities, both to support other European nations against Russia and, something that seemed unimaginable a few years ago, perhaps to defend ourselves. Currently, according to a former senior official at the Ministry of Defense, the UK's forces would be unable to fight and win an armed conflict of any scale. We would rapidly run out of ammunition, could not prevent missile strikes, and could not stop an attack on our territory. Wow, this is, let's say, a brand new reality for those in Britain. Probably have not been thinking of just straight up invasion of their territory for, well, many decades. Something to think about that too over the weekend. We can't get through the rest of the article, but of course I'll point you to it. Now, more to be pointed at from Justice Putnam as he brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to close out our week. We'll be back on Monday with Greg to wrap up the weekend's happening. See you then.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, Justice has more Project 2025 coverage for you, of course, and then a cybersecurity breach that could delay court proceedings across New Mexico. A federal judge sentenced 4 anti-abortion activists for a 2021 Tennessee clinic blockade, and 2 more people charged with conspiring to bribe a Minnesota juror with a bag of cash. Let's hear more about that next.